are you, man?
I'm good, man. And you? Let me just adjust my thing here so it doesn't slip. Yeah, man.
All right, so this is the start to episode 20. We made it to 20. Why don't you tell everybody who we have on camera?
Yeah, give me a sec while I. What's up, man? My name's Homie Diaz. I'm originally from New York, now living in Los Angeles and pursuing my own dream, my own brand, Magnus Alpha, and telling my story through the message of the vehicle of my brand, which is being a product of an immigrant.
That's beautiful. Well, we'll get into that. So for those that don't know, and it's kind of funny how we've sort of reconnected. We've met
Uh-huh.
over the years a couple times, but not really in any capacity. The latest and kind of what sparked this idea of you joining me on an Untold Narrative was, you joined Kiko over at Brooklyn Shoe Space on
Yeah.
their interviews, and then I just did one. And we reconnected that way. We've also crossed paths at ComplexCon
Yep.
when you were with Daniel Bailey. And then I definitely remember, your name's really hard to forget, but I remember when you were at K Swiss way back, it's got to be 5 years ago now.
Yeah, just about. Well, Palladium 5 years ago exactly. I was still at Palladium, and then I moved over to K Swiss in 2000. I want to say 16. I moved over with them, which
So,
is the same company. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, yeah. So we've kind of crossed paths in a number of different ways, but the latest of reconnection, I was like, man, we got to have him on to share your story with everybody as you've kind of transitioned throughout your career in footwear and onto your own thing. I think it's going to be an awesome episode ahead. But with that being said, you said you're from New York. Why don't you talk about kind of your origin? Obviously, you tell a very powerful message through your current brand, and obviously where you grew up and where you're from is obviously super important.
Yeah, man. So I was born and raised in Queens, and for those that don't know, Queens is a melting pot of different cultures. Everyone living on top of one another. It's rated one of the most diverse cities across the world in terms of how many different walks of life, settle there from so many different countries, cultures mashing up together. So that was quite an education growing up, getting a taste of the world, literally above me, below me, beside me, left and right. And that always stuck with me. My parents were born in the Dominican Republic. So basically, my first language was Spanish. They didn't speak any English when I was a child. I didn't learn how to speak English until watching Saturday morning cartoons after a few years of grasping that and then going to kindergarten. So as you can tell, or at least as you can imagine, it was quite a culture shock trying to assimilate to the American standards that were being taught in school. And so I just, that always stuck with me. So the brand ethos as being, is shedding a positive light on the luxury of being a product of an immigrant. The things I experienced naturally growing up, many people pay for those experiences. I was just immersed into it, by my surroundings. So I'm very thankful for that. So my brand pays homage to that.
So what obviously you are currently based in LA.
Yep.
And so at what point growing up, did you just do your full growing up kind of childhood in New York City? And then, where'd you go to school? How'd you get to LA?
Yeah, I went to I was born and raised there, and I didn't move to LA till 2007. So to back that
Okay.
up, I went to Bayside High School for art, and basically, I always had an affinity for art. It was cliche, I guess, stories is like, hey, I was drawing comic books all the time, trying to copy them and create scenes out of a comic book, line for line, shade for shade, trying to replicate it. So that was like my early experiences into art. And then I got into skateboarding in the late 80s. And skateboarding really, turned me on into arts in general. It allowed me to find my expression within art, from music to drawing to graphics. Like for example, the skateboarding videos are very diverse in the music selection. So every skater skated to a completely different genre of music. So you can only imagine, before I was a teenager, I was getting this crash course on music and all these different groups, from the Beatles to Pantera to, hip hop, I mean, like the gamut. It ran the gamut.
Yeah.
So, I developed this ear for all these different genres of music. So that was just one part of art that skateboarding influenced. Then the other was the graphics on skateboards. Like I was just enamored by all the different graphics and the style of art that was applied on skateboards. So that really fueled me into art, and then the way we dressed, our culture, which is pretty evident today, the influence of skateboarding culture and the way we dress. So, that DIY approach to how we, our swagger and most of it for look and feel, and then part of it for function, on a skateboard.
Right.
So that was all like this all encompassing art, design, fashion. It was just all like just a mashup. And then again, all the cultures that I was consuming in New York City. So I ended up going to Bayside High School for art. And, at that time, skateboarding, there wasn't a lot of money in skateboarding at that time, unfortunately, in the industry. It was definitely a stepchild of the hobbies. It wasn't a sport then. So that sucked. So I realized early on that skateboarding wasn't or couldn't be a career for me to
Were
help
you decent
sustain.
at it?
Yeah, man. Honestly, to
It's
be
okay to
honest,
brag a bit.
yeah, I was really good. I was really, really good. Because I put in the time,
Yeah.
not because, hey, I was just a natural. No, because I put in the thousands of hours monthly, like even at some points, especially during the summer, because in New York, the winters would come and that would just
Yeah.
ruin the ability to skate. So, when the good weather rolled around, we went hard at it for day and night. So it was thousands of hours, in a summer period that we were putting into this thing. And I started early. I was, 8 or 9 when I really got into it. And I got into it because there was a few older guys on my block that were skateboarding, that were into Metallica. So again, I got into Metallica, Megadeth because of those guys. And, I was the little kid trying to emulate them and try to follow them. And I wasn't old enough to go off and leave the block with them. So I was kind of this little annoying kid, but at the same time, interesting to them because they were the outcast of the block. And I was like so praising them that they were like, man, we gotta let this kid in. He loves us. So then, I remember one summer to the next, I was literally better than them skateboarding. Like, and they were just blown away. So then I became their friends because I was so good at it. And then next thing you know, like I just started naturally recruiting and organically attracting other kids in the borough to skate. And then I became the go-to guy to go learn how to skate, learn a trick from. And then my block became famous for it. So a lot of skateboarders, when they came to Queens, they would come to my little street to come meet me and either learn a trick or just to hang out or get some food because my mom was an amazing cook. Again, the culture. And yeah, and I became maybe top 5 in Queens. That whenever somebody thought about, Queens in the early 90s, my name came up. And that's just
Wow.
being humble. That's just being humble. It just came up. My name came up.
That's
But again,
amazing.
yeah, but then again, unfortunately for me, there wasn't a lot of money in skateboarding. So, I came from humble beginnings. My parents were just below middle class, level, more on the poor side, obviously. 1-bedroom apartment, a lot of hand-me-downs. So, I owed it to them to really, give my future a serious shot. So, but then again, I went for art. So it
Did they
wasn't
did
like,
they ever push
yes,
back on skateboarding and like you obviously like spending so much time and hours into it?
yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, they supported me and they saw how skateboarding took me away from the real nitty gritty of the neighborhood and the really bad, obvious choices. Drugs, whether
Right.
selling or using, was the king of the block. And then it was me, literally. It was drugs, selling drugs, pushing drugs, using drugs. And then there was me making the noise on the street, literally. Like that was the noise like level. It was like gunshots, skateboarding taps and claps and like grinds on the curbs. Like literally, I was up there with the noise. So they preferred that obviously over what was really going on in the street. So
Did you
yeah,
did you
they supported it.
did you ever consider like going pro or anything like that, or like was that just not an option?
Man, it was a desire. It was definitely a dream. Although as I got older and older, it just, when I started skateboarding, it was somewhat. on the come up. But then as I started to get good, the I guess just the economy with investing in skateboarding leveled out to a certain degree, especially on the East Coast. On the West Coast, it was thriving, but on the East Coast, again, because of the winter, the season was
Yeah.
gone for so long that there was just no eyes on New York City. You know, in terms of skateboard brands on the West Coast prospecting, skaters on the East Coast. So what that means is that few and far in between got really put on to a higher level where they were making money and they were traveling. Fortunately, I had friends that made it, but again, it wasn't that many. It
Yeah.
wasn't dozens of them. It was maybe one out of a dozen that got put on and like took years to get paid. You know what I mean? So again, it was a desire to become pro, but the better I got, the more the industry took a pause on investing in East Coast skaters. So I had to, come to terms with that and say, you know what, I need to invest my time elsewhere. And then that was art.
So you, while you were balancing that, I mean, you obviously had a knack for art and creativity and drawing and all those worlds colliding. So it sounds like you went to like an art specific high school.
Yeah, Bayside High School was known for its sports and art.
Okay.
And the art curriculum was weak at best.
Oh,
it
okay.
was
So
so it was so weak, that I remember being there, and I was more inspired by a couple of older students that were like juniors and seniors at the time when I was a freshman. I was inspired more by them and their talent than the curriculum and the challenges that I was getting from classes. So kind of, I was at a point that I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe art's not a good thing. This sucks. The art in a more higher level of education. I was kind of losing my way at one point. And then when those kids graduated, it was really like so uninspiring that, as I was in junior year, I was just like, man, I don't know about this art thing. I don't even know if I should pursue it. So, when it came around time to apply for colleges and all that pressure from the schools, like, you got to, you got to apply for college now. You got to like select your top picks. Man, I was lost. I was like, I didn't want to be a cliche, I didn't want to be a lawyer or a doctor. It was just, which was everything that everyone else was talking about. Those, the usual suspects of, careers to go into. Meanwhile, I'm in an art school and no one's talking about art. And I'm
yeah.
like, why isn't anybody, like any teachers or any other students, like, yeah, I'm going to, you know, I'm going for Cooper Union. I'm going for Pace. I'm going for all these FIT. Like no one's talking about this stuff. And I'm just like, man, am I the odd man out like I was on my block skateboarding for a while? And interesting enough, before I went into high school, I was in junior high and I was at a family gathering, which one of many because I have a huge family. And I remember one of my aunts, because I'm the eldest grandson on my dad's side, they always looked at me for like pointed questions because I was the older, you know, cousins. An aunt had asked me like, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And at that time, skateboarding art, I was like, "I want to be an artist." And my aunt was like, "Man, artists don't become famous or wealthy until after they're dead. Like Pablo Picasso." And I was like, "Damn, shut me down." I was like, "All right, damn, okay, like great." And interesting enough, like my mom she didn't even say anything at that time at that family gathering, but I came to find out that she put that in her back pocket, that she saw that, man, he was, his aspirations were shut down. So one night we were driving home sometime after from another family gathering, and we were driving by, and my mom points out like, oh, look at that new perfume shop. It was a perfume shop that opened on a shopping strip on our way home, but this was after hours, so it was closed. So we're driving by, and my mom goes like, oh, look at that new perfume shop. I wonder if they have the new Oscar de la Renta perfume in there. So my brother and I, much younger at the time, we were like, huh? We're like, what are you talking about? And we're like, what's Oscar de la Renta? She goes, Oscar de la Renta. You know, he's a Dominican designer. He's alive, he's famous, and he's wealthy. And that shit blew my mind because we're Dominican. So she held that in her back pocket and she threw that in there, kind of like a motivation. Like you can be wealthy and rich as a designer or an artist. Just look at this guy. He's like us. He came
Yeah.
from the same. He came from where I came from, literally. from poverty, and went to Europe, got trained by Balenciaga himself, Lanvin, and like a bunch of other art, and became this, a mega powerhouse couture house. So I was like, wow, okay. So interesting enough, fast forward, I'm back in high school. Like I mentioned, I'm lost. I'm like, oh man, I don't know what I'm gonna do with myself. And then military became, an option. Like, oh, I could travel the world, whatever, get out of here. I'm in my last year of Spanish class, and I walk in for the first time into this class, and the Spanish teacher is Spanish, and she happens to be Dominican, like my parents. At the time, I don't even remember if I knew for sure she was Dominican or not. I just knew she was Caribbean, and she was amazing. Her demeanor, and in one class, she has her classroom is really well decorated, portraits, like she's like really nice vibes in this classroom. And at one point, she says something, and then she goes like Oscar de la Renta, and she points to the side of the classroom, and she had a portrait with him and his wife. Meanwhile, when my mom mentioned this to me, this was pre-internet. I had no
Yeah, yeah,
idea what the
yeah.
guy looked like. I had no way of looking him up. It was just that one time that was like a spark of like inspiration. Went on about my life. Fast forward, I'm depressed. I'm like, I don't know where I'm going in my life in high school. And she mentions that, and for the first time, I see what the man looks like, and I'm like, holy shit! I'm in high school. I'm in art school. This is a sign. I need to do this. I need to
And your
just,
teacher's got a picture with him.
yeah. And I'm like, wow, if there has ever been a sign, this is a sign. So then I decided to apply for Parsons School of Design. I applied to one school.
That's
That was it.
Parsons.
I just applied to Parsons, like this is where I want to go, because one of the older kids at the time when I entered into Bayside, one of them went to Parsons, and I kept in touch with him, and he raved about it. So that was like my point of reference. No one, I didn't know anyone close enough that can give me real feedback on Cooper Union or Pace or FIT, but this person did give me great feedback about Parsons, having been there, and I admired him for his talent. So I was like, you know what, I'm going for Parsons. And again, I applied to one school, and I got in. It was crazy.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, obviously, most people in the design or creative community know Parsons as
Pillow.
a top tier school. I actually have the opportunity in 2 Fridays from now. I'm speaking there for one of their online classes, so I'm super excited about that.
Oh,
Um,
that's dope.
yeah, I mean, Parsons is like renowned, right? So I'm
Yeah.
I'm assuming you had a tremendous experience there.
Oh, it was amazing, man. I mean, Parsons was boot camp for art. That's for one thing. It was straight like it was really hard, but at the same time, I wanted it so bad that I can honestly say for the first time I really applied myself in school. Whereas through high school, I mean, junior high school, I applied myself. Elementary school was whatever, fun, bugging out, and then as a kid. So junior high school, I applied myself really well in school, and then high school, I just fell off, man. Like I said, I got depressed for quite a bit of time, and I felt lost. I was just there to get by,
Do you
and I
think there's a
miraculously got in.
when you reflect on that moment, right, of like really applying yourself to this craft throughout college, do you think it's like the fear of failure, like towards your immigrant parents? Because like speaking for myself, like I was born in Poland, my parents are immigrants as well, and like when I was like an average at best high school student, and then like when I got into like went for industrial design, like I was like, I can't f this up, like this is 40 plus grand a year, like this is it, like I'm doing this, like it was like that fear of fail, like I'm not going to like a community college, like this is my one shot.
1,000%, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that was clutch because again, yeah, it was obviously the money. I had a not a point to prove, but a passion to fulfill. You know, despite what my aunt said or anyone else said, teachers said when they said to me I was an idiot for applying to one school, and of all schools, Parsons, the hardest school to get into. They're like, yeah, good luck with that one. That was the feedback I got. You
Yeah.
know, it was to the point that like, look, I got to do this more for myself than anyone else, but at the same time, there's a lot of people I need to prove wrong in the process. But again, my parents were definitely at the forefront of me uh doing it and giving it my all, because at the same time, it's not like I went to Parsons being like, I'm going to Parsons to graduate and get and become this. I had no idea. I was just in
Right.
there. But at the same time, I was applying myself, taking all the classes and breaking night because it was so hard. It was so many classes. It was like 13 classes a semester. It was rough, man. It was tough. So, my parents, we moved from a one-bedroom apartment for the first time ever when I was 18 going into Parsons into a
Wow.
two-bedroom apartment just so that I had a chance. And I'm the only one that had my own bedroom. My sister slept with my parents in their room. My brother slept in the living room, and I had a bedroom that was really more like a pseudo pantry. It was off the kitchen, connected to the kitchen. It was a bedroom, but it was so tiny, and
Yeah.
that was my space. So I could focus and get my work done. So my
Wow.
parents made their sacrifice, and I had to, make it count, and I did. You
Well, I just got a lot of chills, man. That's
know.
crazy. That's like I love that. That's like legit the American dream, like looking back on it and just, all those sacrifices and things like that. Like you can't make
Yeah.
that stuff up.
Yeah, man. And again, that's why like my brand is about that, being a product of an immigrant, paying homage to that. I am a product of my parents, they
Yeah.
took me to the Dominican Republic every summer from when I was born till maybe, after the age of 12 is when it was every other year because of money,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But, I experienced their lifestyle, firsthand. It's not like I could oh, my parents were poor. No, I know how poor they were. I was
Right.
there. I went there, and I assimilated with the kids in the neighborhood that they grew up in, the shacks and like tin ceilings. Like I know what it is to be poor.
Yeah. That's wild. When you were at Parsons, what was like was there a trigger moment that like was like, oh, footwear is gonna be it? Or like how did you get into footwear? What was your first job out of college?
Yeah, well,
That's a loaded
Parson.
question, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, no, of course. I mean, well, first off, just to make the story more interesting, again, I applied to one school which was very risky, and thanks to skateboarding, this is how crazy the universe is. I went into my admissions meeting, um, to be interviewed for a possibility to even get in, and I went in there, nervous as hell, honestly, with my pseudo portfolio, whatever I had from Bayside, which was pretty crappy to be honest. Again, the curriculum was pretty weak, and I get my name called, and the way the person calls my name, they're like, "Homie." And I'm like, oh, great. Here we go. This person's going to be like, what's your real name? Like, that was the story of my life. Come on, man. What's your real name? And he looks up, and I look up at him, and I'm like, and he's like, oh my God. And it's like this guy I skateboarded with many moons ago. He was older than me, but, we knew each other very well. We
And
hadn't
he's in
seen each other.
admissions.
Yeah. And he's like, and I'm like, he's like, oh my God, man, hugs, like, come in, and it wasn't like I'm in. It was like real reality check. Like, look, man, your portfolio needs work. He coached me. He gave me the best pointers, the best advice. I went home. I must have broke night for like a week straight. Came back, and I got in, man. And it was like, had it been someone else, it would have been like, look, you're just not cut out for this.
Right.
Peace. You know what I
Wow.
mean? So it just goes to show you like the full circle of my life. And he's a product of an immigrant too, technically, whatever, we all are. But it's just interesting, like how the culture played such a huge influence in my life. So now fast forward to to complete the loaded question. Footwear wasn't an option at Parsons. It didn't exist. Back then there was no courses related to footwear whatsoever. I only can remember because whenever I looked at other colleges' curriculums just to be curious, footwear never came up. It was just fashion design, and it was all about draping and illustration, whatever, whatever. So I never even thought about footwear. It never came up, and never, even though I loved footwear and I was really into footwear because being a New Yorker, footwear was, it was just the Bible, and then skateboarding, the type of footwear we had to wear. And so footwear was just a big, huge part of my upbringing. But again, footwear as a career and as a design path never entered my mind. So fast forward, I graduate. unfortunately, I graduated during 9/11, right before 9/11.
Oh my
So
God.
when I graduated in May of 2001, they had warned us at graduation saying, look, the economy is terrible. The art industry, design industry is at an all-time low. You're going to have a hard time finding a job. Please, it's not because you're not ready. It's not because you're not talented enough. You have to ride out the storm. Hang in there. The fact of the matter is, those that'll come away with a job after graduation are those that more than likely had an internship already. But other than that, hang in there. Sure enough, it was terrible in the summer. Then 9/11 happens. I don't even have to go into it. Everything is just shut down. It's terrible. I ended up getting a job with Apple Computer in their store because I just needed to pay the bill. So before that, I was doing retouching, odd jobs, graphic design, whatever I can get my hands on little by little to pay the bills, but there was no like real art job. So I just turned my attention to Apple Computer, who was opening their first store in New York City at the Soho store. And I was like, hey, I applied, I got the job, and I figured it would be a great place to network, which
Sure.
if there's anything that skateboarding taught me was networking. So I got that job there, and that was my first job out of college.
Wow. And so how long did you work there? Like how do you go from that moment to like really big? Because if you Google your name, your footwear career comes up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what happens. So like, how do you go from Apple retail to what's your first footwear brand? Like, how do you make that transition?
Yeah, so I went in with Apple with the, positive, mindset. Most people were bummed for me. My girlfriend at the time, parents, friends are like, you just graduated from school, you got a degree, and you're gonna go work retail? Oh, to me, they were like, you failed, or you're going into this hole that you're gonna get sucked in and never come out of. So everybody was like negative Nancy about it, and I was like, no, this is great. I'm gonna network, I'm gonna meet people. This is my skateboarding culture, mentality speaking and thinking. And everyone's like, you're delusional. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do my thing. So I'm at Apple for 5 years and a few months.
Wow.
And yeah, and I'm just grinding it out. I'm making decent money, enough money to stay there and be a lifer.
Right.
I'm paying my bills. I actually ended up buying a condo. Like, I'm good. I'm really
Wow.
good. But at the same time, I'm like, I got to get out of here. So I was very selective. Job offers came my way to leave Apple, to join the design force in some capacity. But I turned a lot of things down until this one opportunity came my way, and they became my client first, and it was DC Shoes. And so DC Shoes became my client because I became the head of business sales at the Apple Store in Soho. So my job consisted of building business relationships before a transaction. So I was servicing small, medium, and large businesses. So I was dealing with CEOs and presidents and art directors, whatever have you. And I was doing transactions solely based on the product being used for business. So I was in it. I was in the world,
That's a
and it was
story within itself. You go from like
yeah.
base level retail at Apple to like just working with CEOs and businesses.
Yeah, so it got really interesting, man. It got to a point that it was rewarding to a certain level, but at the same time, it was a teaser to my ambition and my passion, which I was seeing the art happen, but I couldn't touch it, you
Wow.
know? So it was like, I got to get out of here and I got to get into that world. And so eventually DC Shoes became my client. And again, I grew up skateboarding, so I knew everything about DC Shoes.
Yeah.
And as fate would have it, the person that came in asking for solutions for DC happened to be someone I knew back in the day, but he wasn't a skateboarder. He was a sneaker aficionado, worked at a famous retail store, sneaker store in Queens, a few towns over from me, which I had been to many, many times. Met him there, met him outside of the store, and he was famous. His name was Sneaker Steve. And basically, him and I knew each other. We lived this parallel lives through Queens, where back to the story when I was doing freelance graphic design after college, even during college, I was designing a lot of like club flyers for party nights. And of course, on the flyer, I would say designed by Homie Diaz, really small print, really tiny. And there was so many flyers that were designed by Homie Diaz, hosted by Sneaker Steve. So we lived this parallel world in that regard, but then we were in opposite worlds. I was skateboarding art. He was pushing sneakers in parties.
Have you
And
ever
I
met him
wasn't,
before this point?
yeah, we knew each other, but
Oh,
we
okay.
weren't hanging out because I was busy skateboarding and doing art. He was busy selling sneakers and doing parties. So, I was so far on this world, but our worlds were always intersecting. So, this was again years prior. So then he, years later, after not having seen each other throughout my college and after college, he comes into the Apple store looking for some help. They point them to me, or they say my name. He's like, you need to talk to Homie. And he's like, Homie? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, I want to talk to Homie. So they call me. I come out of my office and they're like, oh my God, what's up? So anyway, so the relationship builds up, you know, obviously he's like, right away, he's like, oh my God, yeah, that's right. You know DC Shoe better than me. So we have these wild conversations about our stories. He hits up people at corporate that know me, that used to be pro skateboarders or what have you in the world. And they're like, yeah, of course we know Homie. And then the world becomes smaller and smaller. Every time they come to town, which again, they're based in California, in San Diego, whenever the heads of, the big heads would come to town, pro skaters, the directors, the VPs, they would take me out to dinner because, the relationship was building through, a course of a good year. And then they start divulging a lot of plans that they have that they wouldn't share with anyone. And they start telling me about the things they're doing with the company. And one of them was they told me about Rob, Rob's show before it happened. I knew that it was in development. A lot of things were happening that I knew behind the scenes. And then they threw one thing at me where they said, hey, we're going to open a store in Soho, our first DC store. And it was literally around the corner from the Apple store. So I was like, that's interesting. I said, hey, this was before social media. This was strictly blogs, only blogs at this time.
What year was this?
This was 2000, I want to say 2003,
Okay.
2004, So this was all like, Nike Talk and Crooked Talk. Like it was blogs and forums. There was no social media. There was, Facebook was probably,
Not
was just
even.
getting started. Not even. So anyway,
Yeah.
so, it was MySpace and stuff like that. Anyway, so they're talking to me to tell me about this. And I said, hey, you know what? I think what would be a really great idea for you guys to launch or draft some press before you open the store. I think it would be really amazing for you guys to do a collaboration with the Apple store, just our store, because this is the neighborhood that you're opening it. I'm on the managing team, and we have over 315 employees at this one store. And at the time, they knew the store was a big deal. We were the first store to do $1 million in one day.
Wow.
We had seen in the first quarter, we had seen over, I forget how many, it was over 500,000 people in the first quarter. Some ridiculous number came through the door. It was mind-blowing numbers. So everyone knew the power of the Apple store in Soho. It was the first store with the glass stairs. I mean, Jobs was coming in and out of the store, Steve Jobs. It was a big deal. So they were like, that's not a bad idea. So, I guess they got back to talking in corporate. And next thing you know, they're like, yeah, let's do this. So I helped curate and give direction on the sneaker. Next thing you know, Damon Way, the co-founder of DC, he's on a plane from San Diego up to San Francisco, where he had a place to live. And on the plane, he ended up sitting next to the co-founder of Incase. This is Incase in its infancy. Like the Apple store where I worked, we were like the first store to carry Incase. So it was very new at the time. And at that time, just before the collaboration discussion of the Apple store with DC, Incase and DC Shoes had just launched the backpack collaboration. And at the same time, I guess the conversation struck like, hey, we're going to do the shoe at the Apple store Soho. You want to do a shoe bag for it? And they were like, we're in. So they did a shoe bag, a leather shoe bag, and a leather iPod Folio for it.
Wow.
So it was the Soho Striker shoe, all black with a gray logo, rubber tab logo to match our uniform. The black bag with the gray logos on it, the folio case, and everything was adorned Soho. So we couldn't legally put Apple on it, but inside of the labels, it said exclusively designed for the Apple Store Soho employees only.
So sick.
And it was just, and it was so dope. It got a lot of press, everyone in the store freaked out because all of a sudden,
Imagine that today.
Yeah.
It would have probably been like 300 times bigger today.
Exactly. So it was like we got, everyone thought I was kidding when I asked everyone for their size, and management was like, yeah, whatever. And next thing you know, these pallets come in, 300 shoes, and they're like, what the hell is this? And they're like, these are the shoes. They were like, oh my God, you weren't playing. I was
You
like, no. I
actually
was like,
did it.
I was like, the jokes came out, homie, don't play that. Like, it just got crazy. And everybody was like, the staff was just holy
They
freak. They
must
were
have
like, this
loved
is
you.
insane. Yeah, they were like, this is insane. It was an incredible moment. And then, you know, HR ended up getting really annoyed by the situation because the press got out, and then the people that were applying for new positions there were like, if I get the job, do I get a pair of sneakers? And they're like, no, stop asking me about sneakers. Like, it got to that point that it became this thing. It got the word was out. And interesting enough, after the whole thing went down, one of the VPs was in town, and another person was in town. We ended up going out to dinner to like just chill and hang out and celebrate or whatever. And they were like, hey, you should come work for us. And I was like, okay. And they're like, wait, you serious? And I was like, are you serious? And they're like, wait, what? And they were like, oh, I thought you would have been like, I won't leave Apple for you guys. Get out of here. I'm like, that's what they said. And I was like, no, I'm serious. It's time for me to go. Like, what's up? And they're like, okay. So the next thing you know, I get 2 job offers to pick one, which is crazy. Like, I'm like, pick one, whichever one you want, it's yours, but you're going to have to wait. A month or two, because I don't know if it stands now, but with corporate companies and regulations, the job offer has to be out on monster.com and all the job sites for a month to give other people fair chances. Because, in the event that they do find someone higher qualified for the job, but they're like, hey, look, man, we want you, pick one, but we have to wait. And I was like, all right. So I picked one, and it was between global product line manager for skate or global product line manager for lifestyle. At that time, I wasn't skating that much as I used to be. I was more on the lifestyle side of things. I felt that the lifestyle side of it would have been much better for me. And yeah, man, I accepted the job. And on February 1st of 2007, landed and went straight to the office and got my equipment and got to work.
And did you move to San Diego? You said they're based out of, or you stayed in New
Yeah,
York?
yeah. No, I was relocated to San Diego, which was my life dream. Wanting to go San
Wow.
Diego was like the mecca of skateboarding.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I wanted to be in I wanted to be in California all my life, and crazy enough, just to add to the story, prior to that, I had only been to California, San Diego to be exact, once before. And that was 5 years prior, when I had applied to the Apple store, and I got a reply saying, yes, we'd like to interview you. This is the time and day only, because of the volume of candidates. We only have a time slot for your interview at this time and day. And at that time, I had already purchased a ticket to go to San Diego for my cousin's wedding, and I was a groomsman. And I was like, yes, of course. On the same day the day after I'm flying, or the day before, it was like the day of that I was flying, or I was flying the day before the interview. So anyways, I had to cancel my flight because I'm like, no, I'm getting this interview, whatever it costs. And everyone's like, are you ridiculously nuts? I'm like, why don't you fly the day after? And I was like, no, the wedding is like, 24 hours after I would land. Like, I'm not trying to cut it close,
Yeah.
and I want to experience San Diego. I don't want to go to San Diego for 2 days and come back. So anyways, I canceled my flight, repurchased my ticket, and went to the interview. And then I heard back, I don't know, maybe a week or two after I got back from the wedding, and I got the job. So then fast forward, after I get the job, 5.5 years later, I'm in San Diego for the second time in my life as a resident working for DC Shoes. Like, life is just crazy.
I don't even know how you summarize any of and all of that into like a nutshell. That's just, you got to be doing the right things for the universe to connect a lot of those dots. I mean, that's
I hope so.
incredible. That's truly, truly amazing. Holy shit. I mean, so we'll obviously there's a lot more to your career to keep going.
Yeah.
But do you believe in that? You have to believe in like everything happens for a reason, or like that cliche stuff, or like the manifestation, or like any other spin zone you want. Like you have to believe in this stuff, right?
I certainly do. I mean, there's been quite a number of examples throughout my entire life that only leads to the desire to at least believe in that, and it's all how you look at it. It's all how you perceive things. You can perceive, it's so much easier to perceive everything in a negative light, like me taking that job at Apple. Not only that, but canceling my flight. I was poor at the time, man. I wasn't making any
Yeah,
money. It's not like I had money to throw out and be like, yeah, I'll just rebook a ticket, because I didn't buy a refundable ticket because I didn't have the money to buy a refundable ticket,
and it
or
costs
or
more
a
money.
ticket that I could switch. Yeah, I just didn't have the money, and I totally forfeited this ticket. Just obviously, I tried to get it switched out. They're like, nope, you got to pay. So again, you can look at it in a negative light and say, no, I got to go for this. I need this job, not because I need a job. I need this job right now. Art is not paying the bills right now, and it's not because I made a wrong career choice. It's just because it's just not right now, and I need to take two steps backwards in order to advance, or take a right turn when I should have made a left turn. I have to make those decisions because everything happens for a reason, and I have to seize the moment to gain the experience that will be offered through that choice. Everything's an experience. You have to absorb it and learn from it and keep it moving and apply it to the next opportunity.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, Jesus, this has exceeded all of my expectations thus far. I usually don't say that halfway through our conversation on these things, but I'm like I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great. Like, it's a cool story about footwear and stuff. Like, so far, it's been a lot better. So I'm stoked
Thank
when
you, man.
this comes out. But anyway, how long were you at DC?
I was at DC for slightly over 5 years, almost the same as crazy. It's almost the same as Apple. I was at Apple for maybe 5 and 3 months, and DC for probably like 5 and 3 months, if I
So
think about it.
from 2000 what to when?
Seven, 2007 to 2012,
And
summer of 2000.
then I'm gonna combine two questions into one.
Sure.
How would you summarize that experience at DC, and then what was your next experience?
DC was it was DC University, man. If I could just put it into a small phrase, it was DC University. It was a great way to learn about the industry. I mean, for me, it was so much more valuable for me because I was a skateboarder. So I got to, rub shoulders with some
The
of the
best.
best skateboarders in the world that I had looked up to for decades. It wasn't like, oh, I got a job with DC, and now I love these skaters because they're cool. And oh, everyone else loves them. I should love them too. No, these are the guys that I knew from before I was a teenager, man. Danny Way. I knew of Danny Way. I came across Danny Way in like Future Primitive or like Public Domain. Like, I'm talking about 80s, man. Like, I knew about Colin McKay from also Public Domain. He had like a small little like 12-second thing in Canada in this indoor skate park with Lance Mountain. And it was like 15 seconds, if that. And I knew Colin McKay from that second on in my life. I acknowledged who Colin McKay was because he was so tiny in the video that he looked like me. And I was like, oh my God, that could be me. That guy's little compared to all the other skaters who looked more mature and, more through puberty. And there was this tiny little Colin McKay that looked like me. And I'm like, oh my God, I could be Colin McKay. I just have to keep skating. And even Danny Way, when I first saw him, was tiny. He was a little older. He looked a little older than me when I first saw him skateboarding, but he was a little kid. So again, there was Danny Way, Colin McKay, which is, a small inspirational point of why the name of the brand was DC Shoes, Danny and Colin. But there's other reasons why, but that culminated many factors into what DC is today because they were the faces of DC. Then there was Rob Deerdeck. Those were the first three guys on DC Shoes. Then there was so many more. Even Keith Huffnagel, rest in peace. I'm
Yeah,
about to cry right now. I'm about to cry. Sorry.
yeah.
He was on DC Shoes, and yeah, and I knew of him before DC Shoes because he's a New York skateboarder that I looked up to skating. Yeah, I'm getting emotional. Sorry.
No,
I
it's all
looked
right.
up to him, and my best friend's mom my best friend's mom, I mean, I'm talking about best friends since kindergarten. My best friend's mom worked with Keith's mom at the MetLife building in New York,
Oh
and she
shit.
always raved about Keith. And, so I knew about Keith before I knew Keith, and then when I finally met Keith, I mean, I knew of him and I met him again. I was super young at the banks and throughout the city. And when I met him, it was even that more special because I heard of how he was a household name before he was a household name,
Yeah.
you know? Anyway, so, again, these were guys that, and because of DC Shoes, it allowed me to reconnect with Keith many years later because Keith was set up shop in San Francisco.
Yep.
And, I through DC Shoes, I got to go to San Francisco for the first time and visit his store and sell some of the sneakers that I was working on in his store. And, Keith was just a genuine loving guy and he would welcome everyone in regardless. But even so with me, because he had already known me as a little kid, it was a beautiful thing for me with DC Shoes. It wasn't
Wow.
just skateboard. It wasn't just footwear. It was culture. It was allowing me to learn about the sneaker industry within my culture and through the lens of a professional, producer in the industry. So it was huge. It was a huge learning for me, and it's something that I could never ever take for granted. I was lucky. I was so fortunate to get that experience with DC Shoes and travel the world, man. I mean, I visited over just with DC Shoes alone, I visited over 30 countries or
Wow.
something, or over 40 cities and so many factories. And it was amazing, man. I can go on and on just about that. And
Yeah, that is a lot to take in, and obviously you're summarizing 5 years of a lot of athletes, a lot of product, a lot of travel. Obviously, rest in peace to Keith, who passed away this past week. Huff is a tremendous skate brand in itself. I mean,
yeah,
for those who grew up in the 90s or anything like that, you only hear positive things. I read a lot of articles and you only hear positive things. So it sounds like you had a very similar experience. And that's again, I'm just saying, this might be one of the we're not even through. This might be the best conversation I've had yet on this podcast. This is incredible. Holy shit, man. That's what a summary. I asked you for a summary, you just dropped an atom bomb on everybody. And then what was the decision like to leave DC, and then what was your next adventure?
yeah. Well, unfortunately, with DC Shoes, I was eventually laid off because it wasn't. Unfortunately, it wasn't. It was just the industry, um, and it wasn't because of like performance or anything like that. It was, I was fortunate to had survived 6 or 7 layoffs before I was finally laid
Wow.
off. DC Shoes is owned by Quicksilver, and at the time, they had made many unfortunate business decisions, acquiring other companies that completely just failed, and they lost so much money. And DC was fortunately hot and making a lot of money, and I'm humbled and proud to say I was a part of that growth and energizing that growth. But um, the deficit was so big that even the profits that DC was bringing in wasn't enough
Yeah.
to sustain the personnel. And I was laid off, and I was a little guy. It became pretty much a layoff of salaries. They had to cut salaries, and I was like one of like 7 guys on the DC side, 7 people on the DC side, and there was VPs laid off with me and directors, and I was the lowest salary of all of them. And then on the Quicksilver side, it was like 40 some odd people were let
Holy
go.
cow.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, so just no ill will. It is what it is,
Yeah.
and it was
Life
time to
happens.
move on. Again, it was 5+ years of an amazing experience. I will say that they set me up after pretty well. So shout out to DC Shoes and Quicksilver. Um, I give till this day, I give a lot of thanks post my employment with them because they paved the path for me to help me be where I am today. So you know I have nothing bad to say about that. And then the job that I got after was with Palladium Boots, and that was amazing too. Just shortly after.
So
Late.
I do, and again, it's like you're like this this community guy, this connector, this you know, very similar to like just building all these relationships. So it one of the first things, and I, because I don't know you from really any longer of a conversation than this, when I did a little bit of homework, you got to work with the hundreds, and there's an article or a blog post about, you know, working with you through Palladium.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to talk about that experience and the, again, building networking collaborations? I mean, that the article was 2014, it said. I mean, like, that's
Yeah.
even like a little bit before how big collaborations are today, again, like, let alone
Um,
DC and Apple. Now you're talking, you know, collaborations before they get all this hype that is 2020.
yeah. So basically at DC Shoes, really quickly, that was my focus, was working on collaboration. So, you know, I got to work with amazing people, third party um, entities to create amazing collaborations with. So I had that experience from DC. So when I walked into the doors of Palladium, interesting enough, just to back it up with the universe, I want to add this. When I got laid off from DC in that summer, in July of 2012, it wasn't until that winter that I ended up getting the job with Palladium, and it was because um, I had decided to go to Japan with Marcus Troy. And prior to that, I couldn't find work. And my condo in San Diego, because I had already moved up to LA by that time, my condo in San Diego, the tenant disappeared. He was in the military, so he wasn't paying rent for months. My
Oh,
tenant, my tenant in my condo on the East Coast, they were pulling out. So all my savings that I had prepared, because I knew I was going to get laid off, because it was the writing was on the wall with the business, I had prepped my savings to survive in the event that I couldn't find a job for a time, quite some time after. So all my savings got absorbed by all those inconveniences. So, you know, I had already planned to go to Japan because I was saving money, and I was going to plan to travel after DC Shoes and keep my network and just travel the world and get inspiration before, you know, focusing and dedicating my time to a new job. So fast forward, I decided to go to Japan, and my wife was like, "You're crazy. We don't have the money. Why would you go to Japan? What is wrong with you?" And I was like, "No one's going to want me sitting here. I have to go. I have to get out." So as I'm flying to Japan, Marcus Troy gets an email. The president of Palladium, or the VP of marketing for Palladium, sent an email blast to his network saying, "Hey, I'm looking for someone that we need to be able to manage our brand and blah 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 blah." And then he was he was like sitting there, and he's like, "Yo, dude, I just got this email, and they're looking for you. You know, do you know Palladium Boots?" And I was like, "Of course." And they're like, "Do you mind if I connect you?" And I was like, "Yeah." Had I not been on that plane,
yeah.
and Marcus got that email, he would have been like, "I'm busy right now. I'm flying. Like,
Or
I
he
don't want
might
to
have
bother
not
with
thought
you."
of you.
Right. So that universe, it's crazy, right? So I fly back. I come back. I get an interview. The president of which is owned by K Swiss Palladium. For the president of K Swiss is from Queens, like me. We drive. I get the job. It's like crazy. Like they're like, "You're in," you know. So I get this job, and the first thing I work on is thinking about fall 14, you know, which is or whatever it was. Anyway, so um, I'm working on the brand. The first thing I do is like, we need to do a collaboration with Alpha Industries. And they're like, "What? Alpha Industries?" They're like, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? You guys don't even know what this is, or you never thought of it?" And they're like, "I don't know about this." They're like, "Alpha Industries is the absolute parallel to your brand's history and your story. You guys started off making the tires for the warplanes, and they were making the aviator jackets for the pilots." Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, hello, like you guys have to merge, you have to tell this story. So sure enough, you know, we contact, or sure enough, as the universe would have it, we share the same PR agency. So the VP of marketing
Wow.
reached out to the PR agency and said, "Hey, can you reach out to them and let them know that we're interested in a collab?" And they were like, they did, and they were like, "Nope, not interested." And they're like, we only reserve collabs for Japan. We don't want to do any collabs with anyone here in the US." And I was like, "Nope, I'm not taking no for an answer. Set me up with a meeting." So I told the PR agency, I was like, "Set me up with a meeting." They're like, "Well, you know what? They're going to be at the next project show. You guys are going to be there. You know what? Let me see if I can at least set up a phone meeting to introduce each other, and you can take it from there." So of course we walk over, me and the VP and the head of PR. They introduced me to the president, CEO. and I just pitch him, and he falls in love with me, and he's like, we have to do this, because I tell him the story. I tell him his story, and I tell him his story, and I tell him the Palladium story, and he's like, I can't say no to that. So
Yeah.
the PR person and the VP of marketing is like, holy shit, didn't expect that. And we got to work, and that became the biggest collaboration in Palladium's history in terms of volume, and in terms of like just engagement, you know. And this was early Instagram, man. Instagram, like, Palladium was only on Instagram at the time with, like, I remember this, they had 283 followers at that time when I started working for them. Like, they weren't even focusing on Instagram, they weren't even thinking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
you know. So anyway, so, you know, when I did the shoe and I designed the shoe, I designed it because the Palladium was pitched, their whole brand ethos was about exploring, travel. And I felt, okay, great. When you travel, you know, having traveled so much by that point, the biggest pain about traveling was having to take your shoes off at every checkpoint going in and out of an airport. So I designed the boots with the zipper to match the jacket, so you can easily zip off the boot without having to reset your laces. And you take the boots right off, whoop, zip it back on, and you're ready to go. Super easy on and off. So that was the design feature as a function. Obviously, I wanted the fabric to be 100% from Alpha, not something we sourced. Everything was 100% one-to-one and like to match. And then I obviously designed it with the orange lining, which is the story of the jacket. When pilots crashed and survived, they would flip their jackets inside out in the jungle so they can be, you know, noticeable by rescue crews. And that was the point of the jacket, being orange on the liner and making it reversible. So I had to tell that story. And, you know, the webbing tab on the zipper would say, remove before flight on the jacket, because that's what that is. That flag is to, you know, check the engines and the flow. If it's waving, that means it's systems go, then you remove it. On the boots, I wrote remove before exploring. So that was a little thing that got a little rave. And then, you know, when I got the first proto and it was all said and done, you know, the VP of marketing and the team was like, I don't think the boots are going to sell with the orange lining, you know, because you're supposed to flip the boot down and that's how people wear it. And I was like, it's going to be too loud, it's not going to sell as much. And I was like, quite the opposite, it's going to sell more. And they're like, I don't think so, man. I was like, yes, it's going to make the shoe, it's going to make the boot right. And they're like, man, you'll be lucky if you saw 1,000 pairs. You know, most of our collabs yield 1,500 pairs. I'm like, you'll be lucky if we even make half that. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Because you know why? Because I'm guaranteeing you at least 5,000 pairs. And like, oh my God, who is this guy? Who did we hire?
Who did we hire?
Like, we kind of butted heads a little bit, and they're like, what in the world is this? Like, what we hired a monster that's gonna, like, you know, drive us into the ground, and we're gonna crash like these warplanes did. No. Fast forward, the boots drop. We did 50,000 pairs.
That's not even close to 1,000.
Yeah, man, we crushed it. We killed
Wow.
it, and we could have made more, but the material literally missed the boat.
Oh my God.
There was a material delay, and Asia wanted to order. We only made 4 colors, and it was the black, the sage green, the midnight, the navy, and the which is called replica blue, and the burgundy one, the maroon. And that was in the baggie that you fold down. And the Pampa High, the one that you don't fold down, it just comes right above the ankle. We only made the black and the sage in that. So we only did 2 of the Pampa High, and then the 4 colors in the baggie, which you fold. Asia wanted to order like another 40,000 of the Pampa High because they sold more of the Pampa High than the baggie. But the material delay was so bad that they weren't going to meet their deadline, so we didn't make more.
Wow.
So that was till this day, they have never had a collaboration as big.
That's incredible.
Till this day, literally, well, you know what? K-Swiss hasn't had a collaboration that big yet, that many pairs.
Even like their Gary Vee stuff recently?
I worked on that stuff, and no, they didn't make that many pairs in Gary Vee. No, full disclosure.
That's awesome, though. I mean, yeah, I think just exposure-wise, it was probably pretty good, but that's awesome. So how long were you at Palladium?
Palladium, I would say I was for a year, I was just their global product line manager, and then I got promoted to their director global director of product. All together about 4 years.
Okay.
About 4 years, yeah. Maybe a
By
little
the
slightly
by the
over.
way, like, can I just, if you don't mind sharing, like, how old are you during all this? Because I mean I mean, for those listeners, I mean, you throw out the word global in a title, right? It's a big deal, right? So, how old are you? Like, obviously, you have a ton of experience at this point in different facets, but
Yeah, I was so parts, I mean, so DC, yeah, I was in my late mid 20s at DC, 25, 26,
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
you know,
So
25,
you were in
26
your 30s.
with Palladium and
Yeah,
K-Swiss, yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
throughout my 30s, pretty much, yeah.
And so, just to fast forward and after Palladium, what did you end up doing, or why did you leave Palladium?
So Palladium, again, is owned by K-Swiss, and basically K-Swiss, even when I, believe it or not, when I came on to Palladium, I would say several months later, 4 or 5 months later, K-Swiss sold to a Korean company.
I was gonna
I
say,
remember
yeah, yeah.
they sold to, so I got hired like in December of 2000, what it was, 12. And then May of 2013, they got sold to a Korean company. And after a few years, obviously then the whole organization, the whole corporate structure changed. They gave that a test. And what they did was they ended up creating a president for every brand, whereas before it was no, actually, yeah, after they sold, the Korean company set one president for everything, for all brands. And they tried that out for a while, I guess like a year or two. And then after that, they decided to create a president for each brand. So a president for Palladium, a president for K-Swiss, and they had another brand called Otzi, and then they acquired Supra. So then all these brands had their own president, whatever, whatever. And then eventually, they felt like Palladium needed its own president completely, and they gave the presidency to the guy that they actually bought Palladium from. The original K-Swiss owner bought Palladium from in France. He was still operating in France all these years, but France, Palladium is like their Timberland. So that was its own universe. They were doing
Yep.
millions of dollars. So, they were doing their own money over there, but they felt like, the Koreans were like, you know what? He knows what he's doing. Let's give the brand to him to completely develop everything out of France. And so they did a whole nother reorg again. They had to lay off some people, whatever, whatever. And I was just the fortunate one. I guess I was a part of the solution, you know what I'm saying? And they were like, hey, look, we want you to come over to K-Swiss and do what you did for Palladium there. We need, because K-Swiss was on a repetitive, like it was just on a downward slope the entire time while
Yep.
Palladium was going up. So they were like, that's why they had to give the Palladium to France so that they can focus that over there and completely focus on K-Swiss here in the States. So they were like, hey, we want you to come over, literally switch over and be here. If not, there's just no other place for you because we're giving Palladium back over there. And I was like, sure, I'd love to. And that was the very beginning of the whole Gary Vee thing. This was in days and months. This whole reorg was in days and months of the plan and the idea of Gary. So that was one of the selling points from the new president of K-Swiss, saying, look, man, I got this Gary Vee thing that I'm thinking about. What do you think? And I'm like, you're on to something. And I
Did
was
you
like, I'm
know of
in.
him beforehand?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wasn't like a devotee. I wasn't really into Gary Vee, but I was well aware of his angle and what he was doing, what he was about, I was aware, the amount of content level wasn't where it is today. So it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
like
yeah.
Gary Vee all day, every day. It was Gary Vee once or twice a week at that point.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I knew the potential there. He had less than 1 million followers at the time. You know what I
At
mean?
that point,
So
yeah. Now it's
yeah,
what, 5 or 6 or 7? I don't know what it
yeah,
is.
yeah. This was pre 1 million. But again, I saw the potential. It was no doubt in my mind. It wasn't like, ugh, I don't know about this. It was like, now you're going with something, because
Yeah.
K-Swiss was repositioning itself as the brand for entrepreneurs, and he was the voice that was emerging for entrepreneurship. So I was like, okay, now you're aligning.
Yeah.
And my take on it was, which the president appreciated. He was like, damn, I like your take on this. I was like, K-Swiss, the original, what was it? K-Swiss is the American tennis brand, the only American tennis brand. And tennis, the ethos of tennis and the grounds of tennis was born on country clubs, swinging a tennis racket, and in between swinging that tennis racket, these people were willing and dealing deals because that's what they did. They were entrepreneurs, they were business owners, they were at a country club, for Christ's sakes. They weren't at an office all day working. So entrepreneurship was born on the tennis court and then the golf course. You know what I'm saying? Et cetera, et cetera. These are affluent sports. So my whole take was K-Swiss, the American tennis brand, the affluent sport that gave birth to entrepreneurship. And he's just like, whoa, okay.
Let's
you
do it.
sold me on that. You sold me on that. And then the brand just took off with entrepreneurship. So I knew that Gary Vee was the right person for it. I had no doubts whatsoever. I wasn't surprised at what was accomplished with Gary Vee whatsoever. I felt that, the skies was the limit with Gary Vee. So I was fortunate to spearhead and work on all the shoes with Gary, at least the first 5, which, interesting enough, 5 is his favorite number. K-Swiss is a 5-stripe brand. I mean, talk about the universe,
And there's no sixth one.
I don't know. They did do another shoe.
Did they?
They did.
I thought there was only 5. I actually own a pair, believe it or not.
Oh, nice.
I am a fan of Gary Vee's and his messaging. Obviously, he can be over the top sometimes, but the majority of it, I'm a big advocate surrounding yourself, your environment with positivity and a right mentality to set yourself up for success. So I actually do own a pair.
Which was you own?
I own the white clouds, the clouds and dirt version.
Nice.
I own the white lows. I bought them at Complex Con back in 2017, I want to say, or 18, whenever those came out.
Yep. So, I was there.
Yeah. So yeah, just one of those weird moments. I thought about reselling them just because they spiked right after, but I held on to them. I think one day they'll be worth even more.
I'm sure they will.
So yeah, I mean, that's amazing that you got to work with him on it. Like that's his whole team. I actually had Dustin, his current videographer. I had him on the podcast.
Oh yeah,
because he does this thing called Tea with Gary Vee now in the mornings during work from home. Dustin is like his co-host who does all the back end. I had him on this podcast.
Nice.
Yeah, dude. Dustin's a rock star. He just BMX the whole 9 yards. Super cool story too. If you ever have like an hour to listen to, I recommend it.
I will.
So after K-Swiss, is that when you start your own brand? We'll wrap it up with your own brand. I know we've been cruising through it, but man, you got a lot of content in that brain of yours.
Oh yeah, man. There's so much more. Yeah, right after K-Swiss, I started my own brand, as you know, Magnus Alpha, and it was time, man. I had a good decade now in the industry. I learned enough, and I finally had the resources and the confidence to just go on my own and do it the way I believe it should be done. And
was this always like a thing or an idea of yours to have your own brand, or was it over the years of working, you're just I'm tired of corporate life, I want to work for myself?
Yeah, it was an off and on thing for many years to go way back when I was a kid. Growing up in New York City pre-internet, the deception at retail was ridiculous, where a lot of knockoffs were just everywhere. Knockoffs were just so available, from head to toe, from hats all the way down to your feet, knockoffs everywhere. So it was always a challenge to buy something with the confidence that it was legit, and risk being called out by your peers, oh, you got the fake ones, you're a kid, it's not like you have money, you could be oh shit, let me go buy the right thing real quick. No, what your parents bought you, that's all you have for your rest of your school year. Facts. whatever. Yeah. So anyway, so I was always taken back by that, and disappointed or angry or curious as a novice, why do companies with resources leverage their resources to knock other brands off? If I was able to make my own shit and I had a factory or the machinery to make my own stuff, I'd make my own stuff. I'd create my own brand. I would start another movement. Why would you knock something off and try to pass it off as legit? So I was always that was always on the back of my mind. And I'm man, the day I have the resources, I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm going to do something inspiring and positive. And fast forward, I finally, gained the knowledge and the resources to do that. And I was it's time,
And so how long have you been doing it now?
Magnus Alpha now full time post K Swiss. It's gonna be uh 2 years now. Yeah, 2 years at the end of the year. It'll be
Wow.
two official years. I mean, Magnus Alpha was in development during my time at Palladium and K Swiss on the
Yeah.
side. Like it was always an idea. You know, people were always hitting me up. Let's do this, and I'm like, I don't have the money. I don't have I'm not in a position in my life that I can just go off on my own and do that. I have kids, and then it just progressed, and the opportunities just kept getting more and more attainable. And then then my last year at K Swiss, it was becoming more of a tangible reality. So I was like, all right, it's time to do it.
What are like the next steps for the brand, or like what's your goals with it and moving forward, after this year, as it's been a wild ride thus far, but do you have like certain milestones that you need to achieve, or like a strategy that you're going after that you want to share or don't want to share?
No, sure. I mean, right now, I'm leveraging the small success of the brand to help many people in need right now, especially workers in the garment industry that are out of work and not in a position to earn money to put food on the table, especially Latinos here in LA, which make up a majority of the workforce in apparel. So I made a conscious decision from the very beginning when I was launching the brand to produce my products here in the U.S. or in Mexico, um, not in Asia. And nothing against Asia, but just on the sense of sustainability and local, thinking global, acting local kind of
Yeah.
mentality. So right now I just designed these pants that I created solely for the opportunity to create work for these garment workers so that they can earn money, because a lot of factories are shut down because of the pandemic, and some of them may not survive the shutdown. So I've partnered with some factories that I really really respect because of the way they treat their workers, and the setup pre-COVID was very nice and very fair. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing with that right now. The pants are pre-order now until October 1st, because I'd like to get started and create the work for them as soon as possible. So if you go to magnusalpha.com, you'll see the pants there. In terms of COVID and what's going on, flu season's upon us. So I'm launching new hoodies, like the one that I'm wearing actually has a built-in mask in it. So let me see if I can get this one out real quick. So this has a built-in mask.
You got show and tell coming to you live. Look at that. Holy shit.
So yeah, so it's built in. You can just tuck it away. You could switch out the filter. You could switch out the nose bridge. You could detach it and wash it if you don't want to wash the hoodie just yet. And so these are going to be out soon, because it's
Can
flu
we just get
season.
a
So
first look?
yeah. So yeah,
Let's
yeah.
go.
So basically, like, this hoodie, out of sustainability and responsibility, this hoodie is 100% made in the U.S. The cotton is grown here. It's sourced. Everything is done here. The labels, the mask, everything is 100% made in the U.S. In a factory that I would love to work in.
When does it go live?
The hoodie is going to be right after the pants. So the pre-orders closes on October 1st, so next Thursday. I might push it to Friday. I don't know. We'll see how it's going. And then the hoodie would be the following week, because it's flu season right then and there. It's kicking in, and the hoodies would be available right away. I've already cut and sewn a lot of the hoodies to supply any immediate demand.
Well, you have I don't purchase a lot of product, but I promise I will guarantee to buy a hoodie, one of those hoodies, because that is amazing.
Oh, dope.
So
Thank
you
you, man.
definitely got my order in the future, but yeah.
Thank
So
you, man.
in a couple weeks, we'll make sure to plug the links and stuff like that. I don't want to
Dope.
take up too much of your Sunday. I really appreciate you joining us on An Untold Narrative. This has been one of the greatest conversations that we've had. This
Thank
is
you, man.
you got to talk to more people about your story.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying to make the time, man. I have 3 kids. It's been
Yeah, I mean,
crazy.
so I
It's
mean,
been
it
so
sounds like you
crazy.
got a rock star wife if she's questioning your Japan trips, and then you come back being like, "I got a job."
Literally, that's how it all went down. It went down. She's like, I don't understand your world. Okay, whatever. Like, your world is crazy.
Oh my God, that's hey, as long as you just being like, I know what I'm doing. I'm sure she trusts you at this point.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure to plug the links to Alpha Magnus. Where can people find you on social?
Just Homie Diaz, HOMMYDIAZ, or Magnus dot Alpha on Instagram. And then my social handles are the same, just Homie Diaz across all socials.
Perfect.
I'm
Well,
not on Snapchat, but whatever.
yeah, I'm not on that either. I can't keep up with it all. I try to do TikTok on the side, and it's just impossible. Anyway, so please go check out Homie. Check out his work, follow his story, support the product that's going to a good cause. It's made in the U.S. Thanks for joining us, man. This was truly, truly incredible, and I'm blessed to have you on board and you spending the time with us to share your story.
The pleasure's mine, and I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll be in touch super soon. All right.
All right, man. Take care.
Hey, cheers. Thank you so much.